Once again, I ask all of your forgiveness for my horrible background compared to my esteemed co-host over there. I have yet to do a home construction project on my new living quarters like EJ did last year, so you're going to have to deal with a plain white wall for now. But hopefully today, us talking about 4 really interesting games as well as 1 extremely interesting coaching change will make up for my bland background. Before we get to all that, though, EJ, my friend, how are you?
Good. I think you have some laurels to rest on in terms of background. Last year and a half bought you a little bit of grace, I think. We'll see in the comments. But, happy to be back at it. And we will, it's a weird week. We'll get right into the Jets thing. And there's a lot of intrigue around that in terms of what it means for not only that division, but certainly that team. And some other coaches in the league who were thought to be on hotter seats than Robert Saleh.
Yeah, if you told me Saleh got fired before Doug Peterson, I would have said you're crazy. But here we are. It happened. Before we get into discussing that, though, I do want to thank Underdog Fantasy for sponsoring this show the entire season, the entire year, basically being our main content partners for a long time at this point. I still did preserve the neon sign in the background to show my loyalty, but we would not be able to do this without Underdog essentially footing the bill to bring this content to you guys. If you're not familiar with Underdog, that's what we do our pick'ems on every single week. We're going to fill out a pick'em slip as we go game by game today. If you've never played on Underdog before and you either want to tailor pick'ems or do an entirely different one, you do get a Joe Burrow free pick for this week if you're a new Underdog customer. So check that out at the link in the description below or at the QR code on the screen. Use promo code BOOTLEG. You'll get up to $1,000 in deposit bonuses and that Joe Burrow free pick. There's also baseball obviously still going on right now. Hockey's starting up. Basketball's about to get, really interesting before people don't pay attention to it for 3 months and then they come back in April. But, the beginning and the end of basketball season is always really fun. I'm pretty sure college basketball is starting up decently soon here as well. I can't remember exactly when college starts up, and there's also college football going on. There's everything. Like, this is the prime time of the sports calendar. So check out Underdog Fantasy to make all of your sports watching slightly more interesting. And with that, EJ, Robert Saleh, no longer head coach of the New York Jets. I was very surprised by this, but not in maybe the way that people think. It's not that he got fired, because I understand the Jets have been disappointing for 4 straight years. It's the fact that they did it when they're 2-3 early in the season. They're literally 1 win away from taking the division lead. Like, if they win on Monday night, they're leading the division. And yes, they're not performing like they were supposed to, but not necessarily on the side of the ball that Robert Saleh is mostly responsible for. He is a defensive coach, and defensive coaches in this league work when they are paired with really good quarterback play and at least a semi-competent offensive play caller, right? Defensive coaches have worked like that for a long time, except for the Steelers because Mike Tomlin does blood magic, but he's the only exception. But you look around the league like DeMeco Ryans. He's worked out really well because he's DeMeco Ryans. The defense is always going to be really good, but he also got, CJ Stroud and Bobby Slowick. You look at Dan Campbell, who is an offensive coach, but he's more of the rah-rah CEO type, but he has Jared Goff and he has Ben Johnson. So I would say as far as what Saleh is responsible for, which was turning around a previously very bad Jets defense and making them elite, he's done a good job of that. And when people were trying to justify the Saleh firing of the team is super undisciplined, they always start out flat. Fair point. They were pretty high in penalties per game. They were seventh highest in the NFL in terms of penalties per game. But you know who's higher than them in terms of penalties? Houston, Baltimore, Green Bay. They're tied with Detroit. Nobody gives those coaches shit about all those penalties, at least not as much as they should, because, they score points. They have an offense that can make up for those penalties and basically get that same amount of yardage twice. And we've brought this up with Baltimore. It was 2 steps forward, 1 step back with their offense because they would get a bunch of yards and they would, get a holding or whatever, and then they'd have to get it all over again. And I feel like Saleh got the can because his 40-year-old quarterback coming off an Achilles is not playing like an MVP like he was 5 years ago. And because he was forced into hiring a really bad offensive play caller, Nathaniel Hackett, that he didn't even want in the first place, but they had to hire him to get that 40-year-old quarterback in the first place. So he kind of got shafted. And yes, they did start out flat in a lot of games, but the defense never started flat. Saleh's guys never started flat. It was Hackett and Rodgers and the offense because they can't run the ball. And other than when Rodgers, channels the slightly younger version of him, like in the Patriots game where he's throwing dots and just making ridiculous throws, the offense wasn't getting going either. So I don't know. It just didn't sit right with me. Like, if you want to fire him, okay, fire him after the season, but you're 2-3 and the actual side of the ball that Saleh specializes in is playing really well. I don't know. It felt like a scapegoat type move, not necessarily like we have to fire him to turn things around. Is this really going to make a big difference? I don't think so.
I don't think so either. And those long Atlantic flights coming back from games you didn't play well in London make for some very cranky owners. And I think this is probably a larger case of that than anything else. There is a lot to unpack and a lot to talk about. I think this is really the case of a very good defensive head coach stepping up to the big job, which is difficult. We say this all the time, that there are a lot more responsibilities as a head coach than there are as a coordinator. It is a whole different level of visibility and accountability that it is very difficult to get ready for. We see fresh head coaches surround themselves with a lot of former head coaches to try and learn those lessons more quickly, because it is very much a what have you done for me lately league. And a very good defensive head coach stepped up to the big job, entrusted the offensive side of the ball to other people around him, whether that was the GMs or the OCs that he worked with, and those folks not being able to get it done, and Saleh not being able to compensate in other ways. He made the defense very, very good. I think he was a good leader, but I don't know if he loved Zach Wilson or he just trusted other people who did. I don't know.
I hope he didn't love Zach Wilson.
You never know how somebody's evaluations run. I don't know if he thought bringing in Rodgers and Hackett was the right answer, or he just got told it was the right answer and he was desperate at that point because he knew he needed offense if he was going to survive. So he said, yeah. Either way, when you're the head coach, it lands on your plate, and it landed on his. When you get deeper than that, which is what we like to do on this show, and you dig into a little bit of the nuance, despite all the offensive struggles, Saleh really didn't outwardly impress me as the kind of coach who can create wins that you shouldn't get. And you need those in the NFL. You need to steal a couple. Coaching is important. And he basically never picked up any extra games thanks to a plan that he and his coaches put in during the week, or some way that he aligned his guys specifically, the kind of things that the Bill Belichicks of the world do. And we've seen other coaches, even in his division, do it. Saleh never really impressed me as a guy that was going to do that. And so if you start off knowing that you're not picking up anything extra from your coaching and only one side of the ball is going to be really solid, you're playing catch up from the start. Saleh was 20-36 as a head coach over 3+ seasons, which means he lost almost twice as many games as he won. The high water mark, I went back and looked for it. It was probably being 7-4 in 2022 before they ultimately finished 7-10. Mm-hmm. Again, not one of those jobs where we look at the coaching and go, oh man, Joe Burrow got hurt and the Bengals kept winning last year. That's a real credit to their head coach. They never got anything above where you thought they probably should based on talent. Because again, very talented team, and the owner came out and said as much this week. This is the most talented Jets roster ever assembled. Might be a little bit of hyperbole, but he's not terribly wrong. Lots to work with on the defensive side. I would say plenty to work with on the offensive side, and it hasn't always worked out. Yes, injuries have always been a big factor, but after 3 years, nobody's going to keep you because of that unless you win games you shouldn't. That's the only time you get a pass as a head coach in the NFL, is if your guys all go down and you keep winning and, you steal some games that you shouldn't against better teams, then you're going to get the pass. That didn't happen for Saleh. As a result, he's out as a Jets head coach.
Kind of like how Vrabel used to just, like the Titans when they were super banged up, they would still just get wins where you're like, how? Like, how is that remotely possible, right? And I think to your point, the Jets never really did that. Other than like the one game against Josh Allen last year where it was like sugar high Josh just throwing picks. Yeah. But that's about it. That's about it. That's the only one I can remember where I'm like, the Jets won that game? Really?
Mm-hmm.
You know? So I don't know. Again, fire him if you want to fire him. I just thought it was so weird that Adam Gase got a full season to close it out, whereas Saleh didn't. And maybe you could argue like, well, yeah, they intentionally kept Gase because he was tanking and they wanted a better pick. But still, it's like, okay, if you think you're in the last year of the Rodgers experience, or maybe the second to last year of the Rodgers experience at best, don't you want a high pick out of that? I don't know. It's just weird. It's just weird. It's just they think it's going to fix everything, and I don't think it will. Like, I don't think Todd Downing's going to come in and like magically fix this offense, because I remember the last time Todd Downing was an OC and everybody got tired of that really quick. So maybe they just don't have a good play caller in the building. Like, have we thought about that? And maybe they just don't have a not even top 10, top 15 quarterback in the building. Like, Aaron Rodgers had that one TNF game where we're like, oh my God, that looks awesome. And then that was it. And that was weeks ago. So it's like, maybe they don't have a top 15 quarterback in the building. Maybe they don't have a top 15 play caller in the building, and they're just shit out of luck. Like, have we just considered that there's just nothing they can do, and they're just doomed to go 8-9 this year, whether they fired Saleh or not? It's a fair question. Before we move on to our first actual game, by the way, I do want to mention we are recording this on Thursday morning. Normally we record on Wednesday mornings. This week's schedule has been very thrown off for obvious reasons, which is also a reason why we're not doing a TNF live stream this week, because quite frankly, I wouldn't be able to get through it. But we're recording this episode a day later, and as of right now, we don't have any Davante Adams trade news, but the Jets are heavily linked to Davante Adams. It's very possible that by the time this episode comes out, there will be some movement on that front. I'm still not 100% sure Davante's going to fix it, just like I'm not really sure Todd Downing is going to fix it. Like, it'll probably make it better, but good enough to make the playoffs in a loaded AFC? I don't know. Again, it's just we're bailing water from a boat that has several leaks here. So we'll see. And if that trade does happen, we'll talk about it probably on the Monday recap show or in some future episode, because it also depends on price and who's eating what amount of salary, yada, yada, yada. So that's all speculation. But what is not speculation is that we have a great game in the DMV this week. Commanders, Ravens. It's Lamar versus the guy that was compared to Lamar incessantly coming out of college, Jaden Daniels. I want to say something here, EJ. Those comps kind of feel lazy to me. And on some level, I get it, right? Because they're both dynamic runners, like play man coverage to your peril, because if everybody's back is turned and you don't have somebody on the second level who runs 4.4 that can actually realistically spy Jaden, like, he's going to rip off long runs. He's done that repeatedly this year. Their third down conversion rate is super high because of that, dynamic mobility. And Lamar obviously has had that for a long time too. But beyond that, I don't really see the comparisons. Like, as passers, they're very different. Like, they specialize in different areas of the field. And they're both great passers, but in their own way. You know, Jaden is already one of the very best throwers in the NFL in terms of deep outside the numbers targets, in terms of efficiency and explosive plays and everything like that, just like he was at LSU. Like, that offense was half made out of slot fades because he throws that excellently. Whereas Lamar is quite literally the best intermediate middle of the field thrower in the entire league this year. You know what his passer rating is, by the way? On throws between 10 and 22 yards, which is typically the depth that we consider intermediate and in between the numbers, it's 155. He is less than a point away from a perfect passer rating.
I was going to say
118,
and that felt solid. 155 is surprising, but also kind of not for the reasons you stated.
19 of 25 for 300 yards, 2 big-time throws, 3 touchdowns, no picks, 14.7 ADOT. Jaden is also good in that area, and we've talked about that, about how he's grown as an intermediate middle passer, but he's at 14 of 18, so again, less attempts in that area, 221, no big-time throws yet, hasn't threaded too many needles there yet, doesn't mean he can, just means he hasn't. 1 touchdown, 12.3 yards per attempt. But again, if you compare the 20-plus yard targets outside the numbers, that's where Jaden shines. They both have 9 of those each. Jaden's completion percentage is double. His yardage is triple. They both have 3 big-time throws, but Jaden has 2 touchdowns, 17.2 yards per attempt on those deep outside the numbers targets. Lamar is at 6.3, and Jaden has the 4th highest passer rating in the NFL on those throws at 130.8. So again, they're both good to great everywhere, but where they are good and where they are great are different. They both specialize in different kinds of throws. Lamar is very much a surgical, middle of the field thrower. Jaden bombs it down the sidelines. I get the comparisons, but to me, they're not the same quarterback. They're similar in terms of mobility. That's about it. And I think that's kind of what makes this game special, is because you're seeing these contrasting styles in similar athletes. And that, I think, is what really should be noted here.
I think they will come to a very similar middle later in Jaden's career, but they're going to get there going around the barn in very different ways.
Mm-hmm.
And the Ravens come in as a team that, look, they almost won their first 2 games. We talked about that. Then they stomped the Cowboys in Dallas. That was not as close as that final score looked. We talked about that on the recap episode. Slapped the Bills around on national TV. Then outdueled the Bengals team that just wouldn't die. Put up 38 points last week, and they still found a way to win. Yes, they had to outlast them in OT. Yes, they wouldn't have won if Mac had made the kick. I get it. But that is a dangerous football team. They have been dangerous all year. The results in terms of wins have been up and down, but in terms of their performance, they bring in a very good resume. Washington isn't really equipped to handle the kind of danger they're going to face in this little Beltway series. Their defense is 21st in the league in scoring, allowing 23 a game. 2nd worst in rush yards per play allowed, 5.1. Mm-hmm. That's a rough combo to march up against the Ravens team that's number 1 in the league in rushing, and it's by a lot. It's not even close. The Ravens are averaging over 210 yards per game, 6.1 per rush play. Those are college numbers. That's ridiculous. The next closest team in the NFL is 178 yards a game. They're not just whooping up on number 2. They are in a class by themselves running the football, and Washington as a defense ain't great at stopping it. That's rough. Jaden is playing tremendous ball. We've talked a lot about that. Lots of people have talked a lot about that, and rightfully so. He has now won 4 of the 5 NFC Offensive Rookie of the Week honors. You can talk about all of that, but that defense is going to have to give him something. He's going up against a Ravens defense that's better than a lot of defenses he's faced. His own defense is not equipped to handle the opponent's biggest strength. Ultimately, it's probably just too tall a task for this Washington team right now, but I am telling you, I am putting a stake in the ground. I said Beltway series earlier. People have said Subway series or Freeway series or whatever. These teams don't play each other enough. I wish they visited each other's stadium every other year. Not 2 games a year, just 1 game a year with alternating stadiums. Because for the next 4, 5, 6 years, however long Lamar keeps playing, this is going to be must-see TV. It's just going to get better and better and better. And I wish we got it all the freaking time. We don't. Could they end up meeting? It is, but it's one of those NFC, AFC type teams where, they're only slated to meet every 4 years. maybe they mean the Super Bowl, but like that just doesn't feel like near enough to me. I want to see more of this because for the reasons you laid out, the contrasting styles, the fact that it seems like Washington's on the right track in terms of building the team and bringing in the personnel they need, couple of more cycles of that. This is going to be a very fun, very even, very exciting matchup.
And what people don't realize is that whole region is football obsessed. Like they love football.
Oh, yeah.
They just didn't have a whole lot of reasons to get excited about pretty much anything
as
watching
the
football.
Navy slander will not be tolerated this year.
No, but like honestly, like they love the
O's
O's over there. They love the Nats, like, Cat, like all of it. Like they love sports, but when these two teams are good, you experienced it. You lived there for a little while.
Yeah, no, it's a fantastic place to be a football fan.
100%.
And the balance they're going to have with these two superstars, literally on each other's doorstep, I just hope they find a way to maximize it. And that is not preseason games or joint practices. That is finding a way to get that product on the field.
Going back to the Washington defense real quick, I do want to touch on this. Their defense is just bad. Dan Quinn's doing what he can. They don't have the talent to do what Quinn did in Dallas. Like Dallas, when Quinn was there, was very talented defense. He brought some of that talent to Washington. They still don't have enough. They can't play man coverage. We've gone over that for weeks at this point. They literally can't play man. They don't have the guys to do it. So they sit in cover 3. They sit in cover 2. Pretty much exclusively. That's all. Like they don't play a whole lot of quarters because again, through quarters is essentially zone coverage with man coverage principles or man coverage with zone coverage principles, however you want to put it. Either way, guys are getting isolated in space. They don't have guys that can be isolated in space. So it's cover 3, cover 2 all day. They'll blitz here and there. It's like a average to slightly above average blitz rate, but nothing crazy. Like Minnesota or Denver, they're not anywhere near them. So they can't call a whole lot of exotic stuff. They're 27th in EPA per play allowed. They're 31st in terms of successful play percentage allowed. They're just not good, which means Baltimore's going to score a lot, which also means Jaden's going to have to keep up. Not that the Ravens defense has been amazing this year either. They haven't been. They are 20th themselves in terms of EPA per play against. They are 15th in terms of successful play percentage allowed. So they are average to below average defensively for a variety of reasons that we'll probably get into in another show, because this Ravens defense, I think, has been somewhat disappointing compared to Ravens defenses that we're used to. But they are 5th in sim pressure percentage at almost 30%, and they have 20% ish. It's like 22, 23% actual blitzes on top of that. That means DBs are in the backfield constantly. Linebackers are in the backfield constantly. Sometimes it's 4 as a sim pressure. Sometimes it's 5 as a fire zone. Sometimes they'll even call 0 when they decide to get a little bit funky. And it's, 7 or 8. Jaden hasn't seen that before. He hasn't seen this many different kinds of sim pressures. And for those at home that are wondering what those are, sim pressure is basically just a way of saying it is a 4-man rush, but it's not the 4 you expect. It's not like, lining up with just a 4-man surface defensive line and we're rushing those 4 and going. It's, hey, we might be dropping the weak side end and bringing the will linebacker instead, or, we're lined up with like 3 down defensive linemen and 2 linebackers that are up on the line of scrimmage, and we might. I saw them drop. Who was it? Who was the nose tackle that I saw drop into coverage last week? There's 330-pound dude just dropping in the whole zone. I can't remember who it was. Was it Billings? No, I don't think it was Billings. But it's
Travis?
like, hey, we'll drop one of those 5. Maybe we'll drop one of those 5, and then we'll bring like the nickel or something. But it'll still be a 4-man rush. It's just not the 4 you expect. The Ravens do that a lot. And that can be hell for a young quarterback because those types of rush styles produce a lot of free runners because they play with your protections. And again, they're not trying to overload the protection. They're just trying to get you to slide the wrong way or to give them a really good matchup like Justice Hill against Chris Jones in week 1 as an example, right? Like the Ravens have had it done to them too. So I'm not sure Jaden's going to be ready for that. And when you see the Ravens defense get lit up this year, who is it by? Joe Burrow, veteran quarterback, seen a lot. Pat Mahomes, veteran quarterback, seen a lot. Like, this is a rookie going up against a very, very aggressive, exotic pass rush that can cause issues. So all that to say, they're both very good quarterbacks. I mean, Lamar's going to be a Hall of Famer. He's 2-time MVP. Jaden is on the road to being Offensive Rookie of the Year. They're different types of passers. They're both dynamic runners. One of them, who happens to be the 2-time MVP, has more defensive support than the other. That is going to be the difference in this game to me.
I don't disagree. I think it's still going to be fun. I don't think it's going to be as fun for the Commanders fans as it is for the Ravens fans. But again, in successive meetings, whenever those are, I'm looking forward to it because, again, slightly different players, but two of the most dynamic guys at quarterback in the entire league, surrounded by a bunch of other talent. That's a good marquee matchup.
As we build out our underdog entry, we're talking about 4 games today. So I took the opportunity to take 2 names from this game to fill out a full 5-person slip. I took Lamar and Terry McLaurin to represent both sides of this passing game here, because I think there's going to be a bunch of passing yards. Lamar was at 223.5 passing, not because they think that Washington's going to stop them from throwing. More so, I think they're just acknowledging that the Ravens are going to run a lot. I still went higher, personally. I still went higher because I think Washington's going to sit in cover 3 all day long, because that's what Dan Quinn does when he goes against elite rushing attacks, is we are playing cover 3. And who's really good at dissecting cover 3? Lamar. We outlined that about how good he is in terms of working the intermediate middle of the field. Quarterbacks that can manipulate linebackers and work that area tend to do well against this style of defense. So I went Lamar higher than 223.5 passing, and I went Terry McLaurin higher than, what do you think his number was?
87.
59.5. So 59.5 for Terry. That is potentially like 2 catches. Okay.
Yeah, they're predicting a lot of pressure on Jaden and not a lot of resistance from the Washington offensive line, which, I mean, yes, on the first, maybe on the second, but again, that connection has started to come alive, which has been one of my favorite sort of sub-storylines of the season. Is Terry McLaurin has been crying out over his entire NFL career for good quarterback play, and suddenly he has it. And just a meme of Terry like crying on his knees going, this is what it looks like. I'm so happy for him. And, Jaden is well aware of how to use very good receivers. Certainly had them, through high school and through college. And now he's in the pros, and he walks right into a situation with a very good underused wide receiver. And he's like, hey, man, we're going to make this work. And does. That's been super fun to watch. One quick note, and then we'll get back to the show. We're finally starting the fall season, which means lots of family events, holidays, and football Sundays with friends. And you want to look good when you go to all these events, I hope. And that's where Manscaped comes in. I don't own many grooming products, but when you want to take care of yourself and look good, Manscaped has what you need to do it. You don't have to go out and start shopping for individual products or even put together a list. They've got it all for you in one place in the Performance Package 5.0 Ultra, and it's the easiest thing ever. In the Performance Package, you get the Lawnmower 5.0 trimmer, the Weed Whacker 2.0 for ear and nose hair trimming, the Crop Soother Ball aftershave lotion, the Crop Preserver anti-chafing ball deodorant, and of course, the comfy Manscaped boxers and a Shed toiletry bag so you can take it all with you on the road when you travel. Check out all of those and more at manscaped.com. And if you like anything in the entire catalog and you want to get it for yourself, you can get 20% off plus free shipping with the code BOOTLEG at manscaped.com. Again, that's 20% off plus free shipping with the promo code BOOTLEG at manscaped.com. Thank you to Manscaped for partnering with us once again. And with that, let's get back to the show.
All right, next game on the docket here, Chargers, Broncos. This is a game that not many people are talking about, and for pretty good reason, right? The Chargers, even coming off a bye, are still incredibly banged up. I have their Wednesday injury report up right now. Joe Alt, limited. Bosa, DNP. Junior Colson, limited. Even Cameron Dicker, DNP. Gus Edwards, DNP. Christian Fulton, DNP. Derwin, DNP. Khalil Mack, they gave him a rest day. He's still good to go, but again, he's an older gentleman at this point, so we'll give him that. Denzel Perryman, limited with a shoulder. Asante Samuel, limited with a shoulder. Rashawn Slater, limited with that pec still. Jasir Taylor, DNP. Like, this is still a very banged up team, bye week or not. I'm not sure how many of these guys are actually going to play. Again, Wednesday injury reports can sometimes lie to us. We don't have the Thursday ones yet. We don't have the Friday ones yet. Those are the ones that really concern us. But like, this is not exactly a clean sheet here, guys. Like Justin Herbert, I forgot, also limited still too. So you take this banged up Chargers team against one of the very best defenses in the NFL. That is a very underrated storyline as well, is how good this defense is. And they're on the road. And you're playing in that thin, dry fall air over in Denver that feels like you're just breathing in needles if you're not used to it. And I speak as a Southern California resident that used to go visit my brother in Colorado Springs, where he lived for 10 years. And I would step off the plane and go, what is this hellscape? I can't breathe here. Like, this is a tough game for the Chargers. And the Broncos, they started out super rocky this year, but now I'm kind of looking at them. I'm like, they're ugly, but damn, they're effective. Like, it's I don't know, there's something there. Like, they're not great, at least offensively. They're great defensively, but they have this kind of recipe of like, just don't screw it up. Give us 2 good throws a game. The defense is going to get a bunch of tackles for loss. They're going to get turnovers. We'll make plays on special teams, and we'll just grind teams to dust like Steelers style. And it's working, man. It's really working.
I believe that's probably the best comparison, is a very Steelers-like approach to putting together a game plan that doesn't put too much on their quarterback, relies very heavily on the defense. And we're starting to see that. I think a lot of NFL fans saw this Broncos team, come out of the chute with a rookie QB, lose their opening games to the Seahawks and, strangely enough, to the Steelers, and probably just wrote them off. If you're not a Broncos fan, you're like, rookie quarterback, 0-2, talk to you next year. Since then, this is where the story gets interesting. Denver has righted the ship, rolled off 3 straight, is right back in the thick of the AFC race. They have the same record as Buffalo, Baltimore, and the aforementioned Pittsburgh. So if you're talking about, yes, early returns, but they are right there. There are only 2 teams ahead of them, the Chiefs and the Texans, if we're talking about wins. Now, Nick's, as mentioned, has been a bit of a roller coaster. Rookie QBs usually are. Every other week has been decent during this little 3-game win streak, which doesn't portend well for this week, but we won't talk about that. We got to talk about the defense. You mentioned it. It is a worthy story. They've been an absolute rock for this team. And again, that's where the Steelers comparisons come from. And, quite frankly, the Bears have been the same way this year. The defense has been very, very good. The offense has been figuring it out. As far as the Denver defense goes, since that week 1 loss to the Hawks, the defense has allowed 13, 7, 9, and 18 points, respectively. And 8 of those 18 against the Raiders came in garbage time. So that was really a 10-point game. That's 13, 7, 9, and 10 points that mattered over the last week. If your defense is doing that, that's completely suffocating in the modern NFL, and you can win a lot of games. 11.75 points per game over that 4-game stretch. That is plenty enough to say, hey, go squeak it out. Get a touchdown and a field goal. We're going to be close. Get 2 touchdowns. We're winning the game. One of the more fun stories in that defense is Riley Moss, who I kind of completely forgot about. I will be honest. He's in his 2nd year. He was a 3rd-round pick last year, 87 overall out of Iowa. A lot of people were very excited about him. Sean Payton notoriously does not love rookies, and Moss had a very quiet rookie year. He was inactive for 3 games. He did appear in 14 games. The total sort of historical record you could find of him in those games is 2 tackles and 2 assists for the season. That is his mark on last year's Broncos campaign. This year, completely different story. He's been starting opposite Patrick Surtain, and he's going to get a lot of targets because of that, because PS2 is a very good corner, and teams are going to avoid him, which means they're going to throw Moss his way. He has been very good so far. 204 coverage snaps. He's been targeted 31 times, only 19 receptions for 179 yards. I know that sounds like a lot in 5 games. It's not. That's only 36 yards per game. And he's had 3 PBUs and a pick 6. So it'll go a long way if you have a good pair of coverage corners. Of course, pass rush is going to help that. Zach Allen, Jonathan Cooper lead the way there. 22 pressures for Allen, 16 for Cooper. And Nick Bonitto gets an honorable mention because he's got 3 sacks on 9 pressures.
He's been a great run defender for them too.
Yeah. That is a great ratio. So Broncos are a very good story. I'm with you. I would say they're developing quietly and nobody's watching. Chargers come rolling in. Yeah, it's a divisional game. We're not really seeing all of the Chargers, but it feels like the Broncos could take another one here, and then they're 4-2, and then you pretty much have to take them seriously.
This defense has been really, really fascinating to me because you still see a lot of that Wade Phillips DNA in what Vance Joseph calls, and he's always been, I feel like, the true successor to the Wade Phillips defense in terms of like, we are running that 5-2 front. We're going to have like kind of like a hybrid Brooks Reedish type Sam linebacker, which is going to be Nick Bonitto this year. And he's been excellent at that. I would argue he's been just as good, if not better than even Brooks Reed was at his peak when Wade was there in Houston with J.J. Watt and Antonio Smith and Brian Cushing and, once upon a time, D'Amico Ryans, Jonathan Joseph, Kareem Jackson. Like, that defense was awesome, right? And Vance Joseph was there as the DB's coach. He's actually the one who turned around Kareem Jackson's career in the first place. But, we still see a lot of that Wade Phillips DNA, but then you also bring in Jim Leonard, and you're seeing a lot of the exotic pressure packages that Jim Leonard is known for, and you kind of throw those all together, and it's just created this absolutely vicious unit, like unreal good, even if they don't have like a ton of, name brand star talent. Like, everybody knows Patrick Surtain. Not a lot of people know Zach Allen. Not a lot of people know DJ Jones, John Franklin Myers, Riley Moss, like you mentioned. Jonathan Cooper, who was a favorite of mine in the draft. They got him in the 7th round, and he's developed into a really, really good player for them. Nick Bonitto, you were a huge Bonitto guy, if I recall correctly, when he was coming out. He's turned into a great one. McMillan has turned into one of the best nickels in the entire NFL. So they kind of built this elite defense out of mostly guys that casual fans don't pay attention to at all, but they play fast, they play aggressive. They have one of the highest blitz rates in the entire NFL. Looking at it right now in my notes, they are 3rd in terms of overall blitz rate at 48.3%, which is nuts. That's like 20% higher than the Chargers. And Jesse Minter is like not somebody who's afraid of blitzing, but Denver does it a lot. They're 1st in tackles for loss or no gain by a mile. They have 41 so far this year. Chargers are last, but they've also had a bye week in there, so I don't really hold that against them. Denver has the 5th lowest success rate allowed at just above 29%. The Chargers, by the way, fun fact, have the lowest success rate allowed, so their defense is also pretty good. That's why I think this game's going to be like 13-9 or maybe something funky like 11-8. Nobody's scoring in this one. But again, back to Denver. If you look at the structure of their blitzes, they're a very blitz-heavy team. But they're not a fire zone-heavy team. Like, they don't play a lot of 3-3 fire zone like what we see a bunch of teams do. We mentioned Dan Quinn, like when he does fire zones, it's 3-3 fire zone. They don't do a lot of 2-deep fire zones like what you see up in Minnesota, where it's quarters or it's cover 2, but they're still rushing 5. And they play quarters or cover 2 with 6 on the back end. It's man blitzes. Like, they play cover 1 or 0, if they're bringing a lot of bodies, more than basically anybody else when they're blitzing. 47.8% of their blitzing snaps are cover 1. And then they also have the 2nd most snaps of 0 in the entire league as well. They call it about 4 to 5 times a game. Meanwhile, again, 30th in 3-3 fire zone, and 6% of their blitzes, they're in quarters. 35% is Minnesota as a comparison. Like that's huge ass difference there. So all that to say, this style of defense, which is, Wade Phillips structures, but Jim Leonard blitz packages, and also we're playing man coverage and not zone coverage on the back end. All of this is only possible because of the DBs that they have in man coverage on the back end. You brought up Riley Moss. He's been spectacular as their CB2 this year. He has almost double the targets of Surtain, but higher forced incompletion rate. Like he's actually getting his hands on the ball quite a bit. Surtain has been, I'm talking like late 2000s Revis Namdi level, like in terms of just erasing people, whether it's receivers, tight ends, like he's taken on all comers and he's winning. McMillan, like I mentioned, is an elite slot. So you have the best corner trio in the entire league, which lets them call all these man pressures. You literally can't get away with this style of defense without having 3 great man coverage defenders on the back end. What does that remind you of? Oh yeah, the Wade Phillips Denver defense about 10 years ago, where they also had the best corner trio in the NFL and called a bunch of man pressures simply because they could. So to me, no fly zone is back. The names are different. The star power is not as known, but stylistically, it reminds me of them so much, and they are so damn good at it. I really do think the Broncos are going to win this game. And I think it's going to be really, really tough on the Chargers to get anything more than like double digits. Like it would be a feat for me if they got to like 15 against this type of defense.
I would agree. And to double up on your story of visiting your brother in Colorado Springs, I, about 15 years ago, got invited to a wedding, and it was in Crested Butte. So it's another 4,000 feet higher than the game is played at. It's about 9,500. And I could only go for the weekend. I couldn't be there for a lot of the festivities. So I like flew in on Friday night. The rehearsal was Saturday. Wedding was early Sunday, and I flew home. I got there on Friday night, no acclimatization time, but I was only going to be there for like 3 days, and I wasn't in the wedding, so I didn't need all the stuff. I had a light bag. Like I just had I don't even think I took a roller bag. Like I took a little duffel bag full of stuff. Get to the hotel on the slopes at Crested Butte. I think it's 9,700 feet.
Oh gosh.
I'm walking up the stairs to the second floor of this hotel. And I have a little tiny duffel bag. I'm like going one stair at a time, like I'm climbing a mountain, holding onto the railing, like I was like, wow, how do people do this? Like, how do people put out athletic effort, up here? This is a different thing. And yes, that's higher in the game. But again, Los Angeles, pretty much sea level, going to 5,000 feet. It matters. They're probably not going to have time to acclimatize. And it does add up. And this Broncos team is playing fired up right now. It's going to be a tough assignment for the Chargers.
When me and Nikki were skiing in Colorado last fall, because we went, I think it was like the weekend after Thanksgiving, because like nobody's there. Like you fast forward 2 weeks from when we went, and apparently they have like 30,000 people up in the air at any given moment, because that's how many people are on the lifts. And we were at Beaver Creek. And so it's like weekend after Thanksgiving. They randomly got a bunch of snow, and there's nobody on the mountain because nobody's there the week after Thanksgiving. So again, heads up as a tip, if you want to go skiing this year, that's when you go. And, my wife is not a huge skier, and I hadn't done it in a long time. And so, she and her friend, skied about half the day, and they're like, okay, we're gonna chill now. Like you go up the mountain, you do your thing. So I go up to the very top of Beaver Creek, and I'm skiing down it. They get off the lift about halfway up because there's like a bar / like restaurant halfway up the mountain in Beaver Creek. They have like 2 beers, just like lagers, right? And I'm doing my run, and it probably takes, 20, 25 minutes or whatever to get down the whole mountain. And then I'm waiting for them to come off the lift. And they step off at the bottom, and they are fucking hammered.
Yep.
Because 2 beers at that elevator, like you are done, like completely done. And they're like, we would have got here earlier, but the slight incline to get back up to the lift from the bar took like It took like 15 minutes to go like 100 yards. We couldn't do it. Oh man, Colorado is tough. It's a tough environment. And imagine being I get it, they're professional athletes, but imagine trying to play a football game when you're used to like sea level, humid air because the Chargers are right on the
rich
coast.
Oxygen. Nope, you're not getting any.
Man, it's tough. It's tough. And that's also why the Broncos repeatedly have one of the best home field advantages in the NFL, because just like Miami, like you're not used to the Miami heat and humidity when you go there, and it just saps all your energy. Like you go to Denver and your body can't function if you're not used to it. So I think it's going to be another win for Denver. I think they're going to be right in it as far as AFC West standings go. Obviously, we're picking the Chiefs to win it all in the end, but Denver's looking like probably a pretty strong wild card contender because their offense is making less mistakes than they were in the beginning of the year. They're still not super dynamic, but the defense is so darn good. And that is why, looking at our underdog pick'em slips, again, I don't tell EJ these before we go through them. I went with Justin Herbert lower than 31.5 for his longest completion. Here is why. Denver has allowed only 2 completions over 30 yards the entire year. That is the second best mark in the league. Justin Herbert, I'm not even sure if he has more than 2 completions over 30 the entire year, because this is just not a dynamic passing offense. So I would say this is a convergence of not a super great passing game, because again, they're super injured, including their quarterback and their 2 best offensive linemen, as well as meeting an elite passing defense. So give me the Justin Herbert lower than 31.5 for the longest completion, which again is adding into Lamar higher than 223.5 passing and Terry McLaurin higher than 59.5 receiving. All right, next game on the docket. Another one that I don't think people expected us to really talk about this week, but I want to, and for a very good reason. Bengals, Giants. And Giants fans, I want you to pay attention to this because I'm going to praise your team. I often get accused of being a Giants hater. No, I have been a Giants realist. And as a Giants realist, a truth teller, if you will, I want to tell the truth about the Giants right now. This is the best Giants team Brian Daboll has had. Like truly the best Giants team Brian Daboll has had. They're still not like amazing in some aspects, but this is the best offensive line they've had in literally years. They are 16th in terms of pressure rate allowed. Holy shit, they're average. That's amazing. And as a result, Daniel Jones has played better. Not great, but better. And that's all we ever really wanted from him. As far as, his dropbacks when not under pressure, which thank God there's been a lot more of those this year, 81.6% adjusted completion percentage. That's pretty darn good. He gets a lot of completions. And that's with 13 drops, by the way. So he's been very efficient. Not super dynamic in terms of yardage and explosive plays. 911 yards, that's 15th. 4 touchdowns, still 4 picks. He still does turn the ball over. 2 of those were not his fault, though, so we'll give him a little bit of grace there. 7.1 yards per attempt, that's okay. And an 87.1 rating. That's okay. That's all they need from him. Just be okay. Because their offensive line is playing better. Malik Neighbors, when healthy, has been dynamic. Unfortunately, he is still dealing with a really nasty concussion. As of the time of recording this, he still hasn't even practiced. I don't know if he's going to go at this point. But, he's been a big boost to their offense when he's been on the field. And the defense has just been like vicious. We talk about vicious defenses in Denver. You look at this Giants defensive line, led by Dexter Lawrence. Brian Burns has been a great addition. Even Kayvon Thibodeau is playing a lot better this year. He doesn't have the same sack stats so far, but like his pressure rate is way higher. Like in terms of down-to-down consistency, he's played better, which is all I ever wanted from him. Was not just like, don't get me the sacks, like get me consistent down-to-down impact. He's done that this year. Overall, as a team, they have the highest sack percentage in the NFL. They have the 6th highest pass rush win rate as a unit. They're 11th in overall pressure percentage, but again, they convert more of those pressures into sacks than any other team. So as long as Daniel Jones continues to not turn the ball over and just get completions, move the ball, this defense is good enough that they can win games. Like their trench talent, for the first time truly that I can remember in years, is really good on both sides of the ball. And you contrast that with Cincy, who at least defensively is really bad in the trenches. Like this is a kind of sneaky, horrific matchup for the Bengals here. If I had to pick one of these two teams, I'm honestly taking the Giants. And that's not just because I think the Bengals have problems. That's because I think the Giants are legitimately better this year. So drink it up, Giants fans. I'm positive about your team. Like that means they're probably going to lose because I'm positive about your team. But like this is a different kind of Giants ball club. And for the first time in a long time, I'm actually optimistic about where they're going.
Stable foundation for the first time in years, and that really does come from the building of both lines and the effectiveness that they're both displaying in this early season. I'm going to flip it over and talk about the Bengals because the Bengals are a tale of two cities. The defense and the offense could not be farther apart. I said a couple of weeks ago, if the Bengals D didn't turn it around in a couple of weeks, questions about Lou Anarumo would increase. It's time for those questions to increase. Cincinnati's scoring defense used to be fearsome. This year, second worst in the entire NFL, giving almost 30 points a game. That is a very big hole to put any offense in. Third worst in total sacks that they've created, third worst in EPA per play allowed, and third worst in rushing yards allowed per game. Those are not stats we are used to hearing about Cincinnati defenses. This side of the ball has problems for the Bengals, like big problems without good or easy fixes. That's a tissue paper unit right now that has some real functional soul searching to do. And like we said about a team earlier in this podcast, I'm not sure that they have any answers on tap. It's not like, oh, when they get blank back healthy, most of their guys have been healthy. It is attrition over time, and I don't really know what else to attribute it to. Obviously, the lack of pass rush is hurting them. It's just the sum total of things not working out, and it's been dramatic. It's been really fast. It started at the end of last year. We had some questions about that defensive unit last year, some more attrition during the offseason, and then they just came out and, for the most part, have fallen completely flat on their face. Other side of the coin looks completely different. Complete 180 for the offense and the defense. Burrow is having a borderline MVP season on a 1-4 team, which is bananas. I'm going to give you projection totals for Joe right now.
Okay.
4,658 passing yards, 41 touchdowns, 113.6 passer rating, and 72.3 completion percentage. If he does what he's done through the first 5 games for the rest of the season, 46-58, 41, 113 passer rating, 72% completion percentage. That's what he's on pace for.
How is that possible when he couldn't pick up a Gatorade bottle? I was lied to, EJ. What the hell?
Yeah, there's a lot of that going around, but especially the game against the Ravens last week was the perfect microcosm of where this Bengals team is, the perfect snapshot, if you will, of a defense that couldn't really stop anything and an offense that wouldn't give up. And honestly, should have had the Bengals winning that game minus a missed kick. This is a tale of two teams, and those locker rooms are rough. If you've been around the NFL for a long time, when one side of the ball is holding everything up and dragging the team along, and the other side of the ball is really dropping the ball and letting the team down, it can create divisions. It is tough in a team environment to keep a team like that together, where there is so much disparity between the offense and the defense. We'll see. It's going to be a real test for the coaching staff, for the leaders on this team to keep this team from fracturing, because right now the offense is easily good enough to win football games and the defense is easily not. And that is a tough place to be in the NFL. As a result, Cincinnati's going to have a really up and down season. Sometimes the offense is going to bail them out in a boat race, and sometimes it's just not going to work out for them. So this is a tough matchup for them because we talked about the Giants being very solid, very, it's weird to say disciplined, but they have been much more disciplined in their approach this year. And they're coming up against this complete wild card team on the other side that is as unpredictable as it gets.
The key for Cincy, and I don't mean key in a positive way, I mean key in a negative way. The key for Cincy has been their lack of defensive line talent outside of Trey Hendrickson. Like, they are not getting any pass rush from anybody other than Trey. They really have not had a proper answer for no longer having DJ Reader in the middle of their defense, who was so instrumental in their run defense at least being fine for a long time. They were always playing a man down in the box because they loved playing, too high safety looks, and DJ Reader was kind of the reason why they got away with it because he's really damn good in his prime against the run, as a nose tackle /3 technique who could play both spots. And, he got a bunch of pressures as well. Like, he's the rare kind of nose tackle body type that could also rush the passer. He's not Dexter Lawrence, but he's pretty darn close, when he was in his prime. They never really replaced DJ. Like, they never really got somebody who could be that type of impact force on the inside next to Trey Hendrickson. And they're kind of paying the price for that. They also don't have any other like dynamic edge talent opposite of Trey. You kind of compare the Bengals defensive line to what the Giants are bringing, where they have Dexter Lawrence, they have Brian Burns, even Kayvon, like I said, is coming around. Like, that is a trio. You got Batman, you got Robin, and you got Alfred. Like, I'm pretty sure Cincy just has Batman all by himself, and that's about it. So it's tough. Like, you can't stop anybody when you have one great defensive lineman and a bunch of other guys that would be backups on probably every other team in their own division. It's hard to win that way. So the only way I think the Bengals win is if Burrow just scores on, if not every possession, virtually every possession, and you just try to make Daniel Jones keep up. And you test that theory. It's like, is Daniel Jones average enough now that he can score on arguably the worst defense in the league every single time he touches the ball? If the answer is yes, then the Bengals are screwed. Like, they got no way to win. But if you can get him to turn it over like one time, maybe twice, if everything's going to plan, and you kind of steal a couple possessions and you still make him play catch up, okay, then Cincy can win. But I don't trust any other path to victory here. I just don't think it exists. So when looking at our underdog entry for this game, they don't have a whole lot of Giants numbers yet because I think everybody's still kind of waiting on news from Malik Neighbors, but they do have Greg Joseph. So we're doing EJ's favorite thing ever, and we're trusting a kicker. EJ hates when I do this, but I don't have another option. So Greg Joseph over 1.5 field goals. Even if DJ doesn't close the deal in the red zone, I at least think they're going to get to the red zone-ish multiple times. And this could set up to be a pretty decent Greg Joseph game. All right, EJ, rip me a new one. I know it's coming.
You didn't have a choice. It's very difficult to rip you a new one on this. My stated stance against betting on kickers is well recorded. We don't need to go down that road. Given a lack of other options, fine, go for it.
One more quick note, and then we'll get right back to the show. EJ and I love to cook. You guys know that. We don't always have time to, but we love to cook. And HelloFresh is one of the ways that we practice our love of cooking, but without having to spend a whole lot of time to do it. Grocery shopping is not exactly a quick errand half the time, obviously, especially when you're like EJ and you live in the woods, not near any grocery stores. And it could just be expensive to buy certain ingredients that you might only need a little bit of for a particular recipe. That's where HelloFresh comes in. They have 50 recipes to pick from every single week, and those recipes come from a variety of options, including vegetarian, quick and easy, and family-friendly categories. They send you the exact ingredients you need in the exact quantities that you need, so there's less waste. And they ship it right to your door, so you don't need to take the time to go shopping for groceries. It's convenient, it's delicious, and for people that love to cook, it's a great way to do it with as little stress as possible. So if you want to try out HelloFresh for yourself and browse all the recipes and ingredients they have available, go to HelloFresh.com/free bootleg, and that will get you 10 free meals across your first 7 boxes for any new subscriber. Again, that is HelloFresh.com/free bootleg to get those 10 free meals across your first 7 boxes. Thank you once again to HelloFresh for sponsoring today's show. And with that, let's get back to it. Last game on the docket here. Speaking of great kickers, it's going to be the Brandon Aubrey show again this week. Lions, Cowboys. How do I say this nicely? Are the Cowboys the best, worst team in the NFL or the worst, best team in the NFL? I really don't know yet.
The fact that you don't know is probably a pretty good indictment of the Dallas season so far. So first off, Cowboys deserve their flowers for winning a game on the road that I said they were not built to win. So kudos to them for riding Rico Dowdle, of all people, to a victory I really didn't think they could create. They did. Chris, there, I said it. Everybody heard it. Stop giving me shit about it. Now then, the Lions ain't the Steelers. They can actually play offense. 7th in points per game, 3rd in passing yards per game, 6th in rushing yards per game. This is, again, a top 10 offense under Ben Johnson, to the surprise of absolutely nobody.
Yeah.
Last time we saw this Lions team, they were dropping 42 on a Mike McDonald defense on Monday Night Football. 42. That doesn't happen to Mike Mack a lot. Dallas, on the other side, has its hands really full in this game. If they want to stay relevant, to answer your question, are they the best worst team or the worst best team? Who knows? Regardless, if they want to be relevant in the race as it develops for the NFC, they kind of have to win this game. If the Lions take them out behind the woodshed, it's not just this one. The pretender whispers are going to crank up again, and they've got games against the Niners and Eagles over the next 3 weeks. Neither of those games looks like a particularly good matchup right now. So if they can't keep pace with the Lions in this one, it's not the 0-1 that's going to haunt them. It's the possible 0-3 over the next month in the NFC against powerhouses that people are just going to say, this team is the same old Dallas team. They can't compete when it matters, and really write them off even before we get really to the true halfway mark.
When I look at that Cowboys-Steelers game, it's the fact that the Steelers looked so helpless on offense and Dallas still barely won.
Yeah.
That gives me a lot of pause.
Right.
Yes, they played well on defense for a defense that was missing Tank and missing Micah, and like Bland is just practicing now. Like, we think he's going to play this week as of Thursday morning, but they were missing a lot of their star power on defense and still played well. But also the Steelers' offense is just not good. Like, in the fourth quarter at one point, they had over 55% of their entire passing yardage for the game on one drive, with multiple quarterbacks throwing it in that one drive, by the way. So, is it because, the Cowboys are deep on defense? No, because we've seen them get lit up by other teams this same season, Baltimore, New Orleans. Or is it the Steelers are just objectively terrible on offense? That's probably the true answer. But the reason why, I wasn't super impressed with that win is because, okay, you're going up against a really bad Steelers offense that can't really put points on the board, even against a banged up, bad Cowboys defense. And you're still scratching and clawing and fighting for a win because, situationally speaking, this Cowboys offense still gets empty calories. A lot of yardage, moved the ball a lot, but they went 1-4 in the red zone and had 3 turnovers. And they constantly do that. Like, this is a team that is 22nd in terms of red zone efficiency this year. This is a team that is negative in terms of turnover differential per game this year. So it's not like it was just a one-time thing against the Steelers. Like, they do this all the time. They get a bunch of yardage and then they shit the bed because they're the Cowboys. When I look at that Lions-Steelers game, the reason why I say are they the best worst team and the worst best team is because, again, it was empty calories and then shitting the bed where it mattered most. To get all these yards and to move the ball that well and still go 1-4 in the red zone and have 3 turnovers. That's what Dallas does. That is what Dallas does, is they get empty calories and they don't get points. until like they absolutely need it and it's in the fourth quarter and they're down by 1 billion and the score looks closer than it really is. Like how many times have we seen that happen over the last, like not just this year, but the year before that and the year before that and the year before that. Like they bother me with how inconsistent they are in terms of high leverage situations. And it's not just against the Steelers, right? Like that was a team that was objectively horrible on offense in that game. If you're down Micah and you're down Tank and you're down Deron Bland, and they still at one point in the fourth quarter had over 50% of their passing yardage for the entire game on one drive, that is how bad that Steelers passing game is. And yet they were still, scratching and clawing and fighting to win the game in the end, because a game that they should have been up by a lot with all these red zone opportunities, they had 3 turnovers and only converted one of them into a touchdown. So I look at the entire season for them where they're 22nd in terms of red zone efficiency. They're negative in terms of turnover differential per game. And I throw that up against a Detroit team that, as you said, is way better than the Steelers in most facets. Not every facet, but most facets. And I don't think they're going to be able to get away with that against Detroit. Like they got away with it against the Steelers because they knew the Steelers, when they really had to, probably weren't going to score. Like they probably weren't going to get those big answers in the passing game that Detroit is very capable of getting. So I look at this game and I see potentially another Baltimore matchup where they go against a real team that has balance. I mean, the Steelers are a real team, but they're not a balanced team. But they go against a real balanced team like Detroit, and they just don't have the discipline, they don't have the consistency, they don't have the situational awareness to keep up with an actual contender. A lot of empty calories, not a lot of nutrients. That has been the story of Dallas, and it drives me up a wall. Now, if there is one glimmer of hope in this matchup, it's not very many. It's the fact that Detroit's defense for the, 4th, 5th straight year is sort of good on defense. Sort of. Like their elite run defense, again, they have the lowest amount of rushing attempts against them for good reason because they don't allow anything on the ground. 4th best in terms of yards per game. They're, I think, 5th best in terms of average depth of tackle. Like they beat you up when you try to run the ball on them, but they can't really stop the pass because they only have one great pass rusher, similar to Cincy, in Aiden Hutchinson, and everybody else is not really pulling their weight. So, plus they have young DBs that keep committing penalties, which is also driving me up a wall. So again, it's still a one-dimensional Detroit defense. They can stop the run, but they can't stop the pass, which kind of plays into Dallas's hand because I don't have any faith in them being able to stop CeeDee Lamb. So if Dak and CD have a Dak and CD type of day, they have a shot here because Detroit, I don't think they can do anything about that. But if CD gets slowed down a little bit, like just a little bit, I don't think that Dallas has enough answers to go toe-to-toe with Detroit. And that's where it can get really ugly really quickly because they only have one path to win. Speaking of Dallas, they only have one path to win. Detroit has 7 different paths to victory that they can take because of how balanced they are as a team. Like these are the kind of matchups that you just look at it on the surface and you're like, no shot. Like absolutely no shot.
Probability is extremely low. Like you said, you have to play in a very narrow envelope if you're Dallas. If you're Detroit, you don't. You have a much wider scope of things you can turn to if the game is not going your way and still find a way to grind out a win. And Dan Campbell, if anything, as the CEO type head coach, as you mentioned at the top of the podcast, is good at, is getting his team to pivot on offense, on defense, no matter where they are in the season, to say, this is the way we need to win this week. He's been one of the best in the league at that, from game to game, from week to week, getting his team ready to say, it might not be like it was last week. That's okay. We can go to our back foot and still win. We can be pass heavy and still win. We can run through a motherfucker's face and still win. Like, this is the sort of tenor and talent of the Lions right now. And when you look across at the opponent this week, that team is not built in that image.
It's just a bad matchup, which unfortunately for Dallas, they have a lot of bad matchups on their schedule, which is why I think it's not out of the realm of possibility that, as crazy as this is to say, they're on the outside looking in when we get to January. Because I can name 7 better teams, better football teams, maybe not better passing games, but better football teams. I can name 7 better ones in their own conference right now. So it's tough. If they won because Dak and CD had a ridiculous week, I would understand it. But I think the odds of that one particular lane having all green lights, I think are fairly low. So, all right, pretty good, 4-pack of games this week. There was a bunch of other ones we could have talked about. But again, for obvious reasons, I didn't have a whole lot of time to research more than 4 games. So I hit up EJ and I was like, hey, can we drop it from 5 to 4 this week? And we'll also talk Saleh. And because EJ is a great human being, he said yes. So if there's any other games you want us to talk about in the recap show, please feel free to leave those in the comments below. We'll also see you guys again next Thursday for the Thursday night live stream, which is some game that I haven't even looked up yet. This week is Hawks Niners, so we'll watch that and probably react to it on the Monday show as well, because we won't be doing a stream for it. Make sure that if you are going to be doing your pick'em slips for this week, you check out Underdog Fantasy in the link in the description below, as well as the QR code on the screen. Use promo code BOOTLEG. That will, of course, give you up to $1,000 in deposit bonuses, and you get a free pick. And I'm assuming that he can get at least half a yard passing this week, unless Dexter Lawrence breaks him in half immediately, because he's Dexter Lawrence and he might be the best defensive player in the league. We'll see. Also want to thank all of our executive producers at Bootleg Football on our Patreon: Andrew, Connor, Icon, Liam, and Mike. Appreciate all of you guys once again. Let's see. Who am I missing? Homage? EJ, have we done homage yet? I don't think we have.
We have not done homage, and we should, because I'm wearing their t-shirt, and if we don't say anything nice about them, it might just disappear, and that would scare people.
Yes, you can find all bootleg clothing, as well as clothing for your favorite NFL team, whoever it happens to be. They have the license for everybody over on Homage. They have fun designs. They have throwbacks. They have Grateful Dead NFL crossovers if you're a deadhead. They have college football. Like, they have everything over at Homage. And whatever you get doesn't even have to be our stuff. We get a cut of it if you use the link in the description below or the QR code on the screen to do your shopping. So thank you to everybody who supports us. Thank you to everybody who has sent me kind words this week. I appreciate it more than you could possibly imagine. And so does my wife. I'm going to get out of here before it gets bad. We will see you on